Oh, hi. Sorry, got me editing. Kind of working on a new Harry Prentice story, and I've just finished it. I'm just working on the editing for it. Haven't even got it into the book yet, but I'm going to do a new series of Harry Prentice books or stories. And the first one is going to be Jack and Jill. Since you're here, I might as well hear it. So let's see what you leave comments if you want. Let me know what you think of it. If you like it, this will be the first one in it. And I don't always do ones before I put them out in books, but let's do this one. OSI agents Harry and Oliver were lazing behind their desks, annotating reports and clarifying statements in a leisurely manner. Outside, the sun blazed and a light wind blew. Harry opened the window and promptly regretted it when an errant gust blew sheaves of papers onto the floor. With a grunt, he bent over and gathered them together. Straining up, he was met with a grin from Oliver, whose desk was just out of line with the airflow. Poised over his desk, Harry sorted through the mess of papers. As he tapped them into alignment, he patted them into shape and laid them before him. The top page showed a couple with bandages on their arms and sides. The man had a wrap bandage on the right side of his shoulder. The caption underneath read, Senior Airman Darnell Wilson and Miss Penny Lane. Harry read the case history underneath. Senior Airman Darnell Wilson and Miss Penny Lane had been accosted while walking down King Lane by a person wearing a black face covering. The individual was dressed completely in black. The individual threatened them with a blade and demanded their money. This was speedily given to them, and then the individual tossed it aside. They looked steadily at Ms. Lane before stabbing Senior Airman Wilson. When Ms. Lane tried to shield Senior Airman Wilson, the individual tried to pull her off with their free hand. Ms. Lane resisted clinging onto Senior Airman Wilson. The culprit then lunged at Ms. Lane, striking her in the right shoulder and continuing down, piercing her in the right side. Neither of these people could offer any clue as to the assailant or the reason for the assault. Robbery was not the motive, as the individual left the purse and wallet in the bush where they had tossed them. Assailant remains at large. With no further information, this case has been assigned as pending further investigation. The paper was dated June 15, 1987, a week previous. He checked around and no one seemed interested in taking up the case. He laid it in front of Oliver. What say we take this on? It's a hell of a lot more interesting than shuffling papers. Oliver looked the report over. Looks like a dead one, nothing to go on. Harry tapped on the paragraph he thought would give a start. He tried to pull her off Wilson, which he clung to him. Seems that angered him. I'd say he was pulling her off because he was probably jealous. When he couldn't get her to himself, he stabbed her out of anger and frustration. Oliver looked up. Oh, you might be right. He looked down at his own stack of papers and groaned. Let's put this up to the captain and see if he'll let us take it on. In the office of Captain Martin, they went over the case as they saw it. They received clearance to proceed. Stepping outside the office, they packed away the rest of the files on their desks and rushed out the door. As they emerged from the darkness of the office, the glare of the sunlight made them shade their eyes. They hopped onto a base shuttle and rode to base housing. Ms. Lane was a civilian who worked as a base exchange accountant. Since she was going to be stationed here a long time, she had received permission for housing on base. Oliver knocked. When the door opened, he introduced Harry and himself. Ushered inside, they were seated at the dining room table, and over a cup of coffee and scones, she related what happened. I really don't know what I can add to that. That isn't in your report already. She drummed her fingers on the table, her diamond ring flashing intermittently when the sunlight struck it. Harry grinned. Well, congratulations on your recent engagement. She looked up startled. How do you know my engagement was recent? Harry's grin broadened. Your ring is new, judging by its condition, and the indent on your finger is fresh. Had you had the ring for longer, the indent would have been more permanent. When you grasped your cup, I noticed that the ring moved. Your skin sprang up, showing the ring was recently acquired. She held the ring out and admired the play of light shining over it. You're right. Darnell just recently asked me to marry him. He gave it to me a couple of weeks ago. She looked at Harry and her eyebrows puckered. You see a lot, and quick too. Maybe if I try harder, I can think of something to help. Oliver asked for a list of her acquaintances. Is there any of these males on this list that is fond of you or might have looked upon you as a possible close friend? She shook her head negatively. No, they're all from work. I don't go out much, and since I met Darnell, I don't go out in law unless I'm with him. They asked a few more questions about the assailant. What was he wearing, type of shoes, jewelry worn? Most of this was already in the report, but one piece of information that was new regarded the belt. It was blue, not black. She remembered when the person moved under the light that the belt stood out. The buckle was smooth and shiny like the belt worn on the Blues uniform. She shrugged and apologized for not remembering more. She ran her hands through her gold hair, and frowned. When she said nothing more, but sat finger combing her hair, Harry and Oliver decided to leave. With a start, she rose from the chair and escorted them to the door. Thanks for the coffee and scones, Harry waved and pulled Oliver down the path. A Blues belt. Maybe they're military. Are any of those on her list? Oliver looked at the list. Nope, all civilians. Seems like they all work at the BX too. They were on the way to the shuttle stop to go back and get Harry's car to interview Mr. Wilson when their beepers went off. Harry saw in the distance a red call box and rushed to it. Oliver followed it at a more leisurely pace. Harry stepped out of the box as Oliver approached. We have to go back to the office. There were 2 more attacks last night. Back at OSI, 2 couples were waiting in the captain's office. The captain rose and excused himself so Harry and Oliver could take over the interviews. The reports they received were almost identical to the ones given by Wilson and Lane. They filled in the reports and thanked the couple for coming in with an assurance that they would investigate the attack thoroughly. The captain returned and escorted the couples out. Harry and Oliver remained, waiting for him. Well, gentlemen, it seems we have an individual on a spree. All of these attacks happened in different parts of the base, but the MO is the same. Harry looked up from his notes. What about the fact that all the couples were mixed race? Oliver was startled. You mean maybe the guy's a racist or something? Harry shrugged. Maybe. I'm not saying they are. I'm just saying it's something to bear in mind. The captain looked thoughtful. I have heard there's a group of them around. They're keeping pretty quiet since their numbers are few. Well, it could be that, but I have a feeling it isn't. Harry was set to object, but Oliver laid a hand on his shoulder. After the meeting, they went back over the notes looking for a lead. Harry went to the map and pinned the locations of the attacks. Looks like locations are random. There's no way to stake out an area and wait. Oliver went to the board and looked at the pinned areas. No pattern except they seem to be secluded areas a couple might use for a rendezvous. For the next few hours, Harry and Oliver visited the areas in question. All were open areas with benches and heavily grassed. Harry was annoying Oliver with his Sherlock routine. Harry was peering into bushes, examining the ground under the benches, picking up cigarette butts. Harry's security forces have already gone over the place and collected any evidence. Harry stood, his face red from squatting, looking under the bench. I'm just checking around to see if anything got missed. Oliver snorted. Hey, what was the idea of your declamation on Lane's ring? Seemed a little showing off to me. Harry sat down to defend himself. I did it to show what we're observant and intuitive. People aren't inclined to lie to you if they think that you can tell straight off if they're lying. Oliver agreed. Say stuff like that when we're interviewing the assailant, not the victim. Oliver sat on the bench to do some thinking. Harry wandered around to do his. Oliver opened to Harry. What I don't get is that the people were attacked but not killed. From what we're being told, the attacker was in a rage, but still in control enough to inflict wounds. Harry agreed and offered a reason. Maybe they are not normally aggressive and something drove them to the point of aggression. They still might shrink from murder at the last. Oliver agreed, shrugged, stretched, and checked his watch, mentioning it was clocking out time. Can I drop you off home? Harry shook his head. Nope. They have a dance on tonight at the club, so I figure since I'm already in a suit, I might just head over there for a while. Oh, have fun. Oliver stopped and turned around. I thought you told me you didn't know how to dance. Harry acknowledged this with a shrug. True, guess I'll go and oogle all the pretties. Oliver slid into his car and waved goodnight to Harry. It was a cool evening, and Harry was glad of the wool jacket of his suit. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a packet of Dunhills and inhaled deeply. As he walked, he let little wisps of smoke trickle out like the puffs of a steam locomotive. He blew out the rest so that it plumed as he whistled loudly. Laughing softly to himself, he walked the rest of the way to the club, mimicking a train the entire way. Opening the door to the club, he surveyed the interior. To his right were a few inexpensive slots. He had avoided these ever since one of his first paychecks was lost in there. He gave it a wide berth and walked into the large bar room where the dance was to be held. It was still early, so he got a pint and sat at a front corner table. From here, he could watch as people entered as well as having a commanding view of the floor. He sauntered back to the bar, leaning against it, and talked to John, the bartender. John was wiping up the bar. Didn't expect you to see you here tonight, Harry. You said you didn't dance. Harry took a long pull at his pint. I don't, but that doesn't mean I can't enjoy some company, though. John's lips tightened. Oh, so you're here for a pickup, then? Harry emptied his pint. Nope. Just here to be with people. I don't believe in one-night stands, and for all I know, I could get orders soon. It wouldn't be fair to start something serious and not be able to take her with me. John's face relaxed as he poured Harry another pint. There aren't many that'll come in tonight, shares your view. It's just like it was in World War II. Bunch of Yanks come in, and the next thing you know, there aren't any girls left for our boys. I lost my best girl to a Yank a long time ago. A reminiscent look came into John's eyes. He shook his head sadly. Still hurts like hell when I think of her. Harry sympathized sincerely and bought him a pipe. Resuming his seat, he watched the guys from the dorms file in. The noise rose as folks talked and shot pool on one of the tables at the side. As they drank and talked, they cast surreptitious eyes towards the doorway in expectation of what was to come. Around 2000, the sound of chatter and laughter was heard from the entranceway. A bevy of beauties waltzed in and began to mingle with the males. Soon the area around the bar was engulfed as the men brought drinks for the ladies. John was hard-pressed to fill the orders. He rushed back and forth from tap to tap as he poured pints and half pints. From the speakers on the wall, a selection of dance music poured forth, and some advanced to the open spaces. Excuse me. John sat with Harry and surveyed the dancers. Can't say much for what they call dancing these days, John muttered as he looked over the dancers. Harry stifled a laugh. Well, you prefer the jitterbug or swing? John looked shocked. Now, what do you know about the jitterbug? Not much, but I hear it was pretty energetic. A young lady approached the table where they were sitting. She was attractive and diminutive. She had a gentle smile as she approached. John nudged Harry. Well, how's your resolve now? Harry began to rise as she approached. She smiled at Harry, but approached John. I was wondering if you'd teach me a dance you know. John rose with dignity and placed her arm in his. As they approached the dance floor, swing music issued forth over the speakers. Harry rested his glass on the table and watched John and the young lady. They started slow as John explained the dance to her, then the floor was cleared as they took off. Swing and the jitterbug apparently were very energetic, and though John was in his 60s, he still had retained his vigor. As they twirled and flew around the floor, several enterprising couples joined in. Though not as adept as John and his partner, they nevertheless were in for the win. By the time the music ended, there were quite a few who had joined in on the floor, and the floor was crowded with laughing dancers and applauding watchers. John brought his companion a drink, and she went back to the milling throng. Harry complimented John on his dancing. You still got a bit of style about you. John wiped his brow. I remember being able to do that all evening. Can't go as long as I used to now. He smiled as the young lady came back into view and waved at them. John's eyes got misty momentarily as he watched her dancing with a young American. She looks a bit like my Mary. Same long curls in her hair and about the same size. I wonder where she is now. Harry sat quietly as John was lost in reminiscences. A few customers came up to the bar and John roused himself to deal with their orders. Harry ordered a half pint to top off. He spun it out a little longer, then walked outward to lodging. 2.5 pints was his limit, and he wasn't going to drive intoxicated. Getting a ticket for drunk driving as an OSI agent would look just great. He paid his $8 for the night and went to bed. Back at the club, John was announcing last call and the beginning to clean up. He saw the young lady he had danced with heading out with a young man headed for the dorms. She gave him a cheery farewell, albeit with a slightly intoxicated look about her. He shook his head in disappointment and continued to clean up. He locked the bar and then turned off most of the lights. A few were left on so security could see all was well when they made their rounds. John locked the front door and then made his way to his car. It was a long walk to the fence line, just past the single officer's dorms. He liked to stroll in the evening and catch the fresh air, after all, the smoke and heat of the club. He was passing the last dorm when he heard a snuffle and whimper to his left. On the stoop was the young lady he had met earlier. "Hattie, that you, child?" She wiped her eyes and blew her nose. "Yes, it's me." She rose and walked, both upset and embarrassed. "I went to his room and he wanted to, but I didn't. She couldn't get the words out to John, so passed over that part. Anyway, she just now kicked me out." John's jaw clenched and his fingers closed into a fist. Hetty was still snuffling. "He told me to find my own way home. The cabs and buses won't be back for at least an hour. I'm cold and tired, and now I've got a long walk home." John wrapped his coat around her shoulders and escorted her to his car. "You really don't mind?" She looked up at him with a so pathetic countenance that John's heart gave a double thump. "No, I don't mind." As they drove out the gate and headed to Beck Row, John tried to find out anything she could tell him about the lieutenant. She couldn't remember his room number or even which dorm she had come out from. She admitted that she had drunk more than she should have. "All I wanted to do was have a good time," she whimpered. "You don't do this very often, do you?" She shook her head. A few of her girlfriends had induced her to join them on base for some free booze and dancing. They did it all the time and told her it'd be a blast. She slumped lower in her seat. "It was fun at the beginning, and I enjoyed dancing with you." She patted his hand on the stick shift of the Austin Mini. "I guess I won't be doing that again anyways." John muttered "good" under his breath. He pulled up to a small cottage and escorted her to the door. She invited him inside, but he courteously declined with an admonition that she go straight to bed and get some rest. The rest of the way home, John grumbled to himself. Harry woke the next morning with only a slight headache and crossed the street heading to Mickey's Tea Bar for some breakfast. As he passed his car, he changed his mind and went into Mildenhall to the small tea shop he frequented, where he could get a full breakfast. Sated, he went to Oliver's house to pick him up. "Had a good night's rest?" Oliver inquired as he finished off his own meal. Harry poured himself a cup of tea and sat down opposite Oliver to tell him about his night of debauchery. Seated in the front room, they discussed the case so far. Oliver handed over a couple of more reports the captain had acquired the day before. They were all similar to the ones they had been received earlier. "The captain did mention that your idea of a racist slant will have to be set aside, since out of the 3 new cases, 2 are both white and 1 Asian." Harry shrugged as Oliver pulled out a small base map and placed 3 more X's at the locations of the latest attacks. Harry studied the map looking for some continuity. The attacks looked random, but there had to be something tying them together. He started enumerating what he could. All the attacks were fanned out across the base. The people were chosen at random and not based on race, age, or gender. He scratched his head. "I don't get it. What are we missing?" Oliver turned the map around. He took a ruler and drew a line down from the most center attack, and then drew a line down linking the rest of the attacks to the center line. Within the lines were 3 possible points of interest. If we use this as our guide, then we have 3 starting points: the fitness center, the club, and the rec center. Harry agreed and looked at the reports once more. All the days of the attacks were on Tuesday or Friday, and all after the 2200. He added the notation onto the map. I said we should eliminate the fitness center. It doesn't fit the time scheme. Oliver posited. Harry agreed. What goes on at the rec center on Tuesday and continues into the night? Oliver inquired. Harry pulled out his notebook and flipped through the pages until he came to the note of things to do on base. Tuesday and Friday at the rec center is bingo night. It usually ends about 2100. Harry, I don't think bingo is going to draw much from the off base. It's got to be the club. That brings many a fair maiden from the town here, and plenty stay to the end or the evening or longer. Harry checked the reports again. I think you're right. Look at the ranks on the males and none on the females. Oliver refilled the cup and leaned back in his chair. I think we're onto something here. He sank into a deep reverie. Suddenly he went to the kitchen and placed a call. He came back in and sat down at the edge of his chair. I put a call through to Miss Martin. She's on her way over. Harry cocked an eyebrow. Who's she when she's at home? Oliver lay back again. She's only recently come to OSI. Works in the photo lab as the resident expert in photographic analysis. She's a British civilian and really knows her stuff. It's a shame we didn't have her on the first case together. It's funny, she's almost 30, but looks like she's in her late teens or early 20s. I'm surprised you haven't seen her by now. A rap on the door, and Oliver rose to let his guest in. Harry rose as she entered. To his surprise, he had seen Miss Martin after all. But not at work. He shook her hand. Didn't I meet you at the club for a while ago? She nodded and smiled. You were sitting with John when I asked him to teach me to dance. He really knows how, too. He's a nice chap. Harry nodded agreement. I heard he picked you up and took you home when one of the lieutenants was being an asshole. Kicked you out in the middle of the night. She took the cup of tea Oliver had poured out for her and added sugar to it. It wasn't quite like that. The lieutenant had been buying drink after drink for some poor child, and she was at the point I was worried for her. I seduced him into thinking I was already fairly drunk and would be a better conquest than her. Once I had his full attention, I went to the bar and asked John to call her a taxi, giving him £1 to pay for it. He ensured she got away all right. After a while, the lieutenant wanted to leave. I let him lead me out. I waved to John on the way. Halfway to the officer dorms, I picked a fight with him, and by the time we got to where he lived, he wasn't interested anymore. I was sitting on the stops resting for a bit when John came along. I gave him a sob story and he drove me home. Wrong of me probably, but I didn't want to hang around waiting for a taxi to come back. Harry lit her cigarette. She smoked for a while in silence while Oliver meditated on how to put his request to her. When her cigarette was finished, she turned to Oliver. What is it you want me to do? The abruptness shook him. He quickly regained his poise and put forward in a straightforward manner. We believe we have discovered where the attacker is making their start from. We believe they do. They go to the club, chooses some couple that they decide for reasons of their own are, shall we say, are objectionable to him, out of jealousy or some other reason. Our opinion is that he is against military and civilian females getting together. We want you to serve as bait. Pick a military person at the dance, convince him to take you out for an evening stroll, and we will be following ready to attack if you are attacked. She gave the proposal careful consideration. She was looking alternatively at Harry and Oliver speculatively. I agree, however, with this proviso. I want to enter as I have, on my own, as if I've come in from town. I want to approach Harry here and inveigle him to buy me a few drinks, then have him escort me out. She looked at Harry and a slight smile crossed her lips. Oliver was curious. Why Harry? Harry was just as curious, though the prospect was certainly not unpleasant to him. She ticked off her points on her fingers. 1, he's OSI, so he'd be safest to do this with in case of emergency. 2, I have seen him previously when he was at the table with John. And 3, here her smile broadened. He's kind of a cutie. Harry choked on his tea and turned red with embarrassment, but readily agreed to be made as well. She left with the assurance that everything would be prepared before the dance. Harry and Oliver called in to the captain and described what they had wanted to do. Receiving approval, they set in motion their plans for capturing the assailant. Tuesday arrived and all was set for the trap to be sprung. The captain had stationed agents at 5 of 6 sites. Harry and Hattie had been in contact working over the script for the evening. Harry arrived at the club early and took his customary seat at the corner. John welcomed him warmly and brought him a pint as well as one for himself. "I really don't know why you come to these dances when I have never seen you on the floor," Harry shrugged. "Guess I'm waiting to be asked." John spit a bit of his beer back into the glass. He looked at Harry with a grin. "Good luck with that." He finished off his beer and then went behind the counter as people started ambling in. The place started filling up and there was still no sign of Hattie. She finally showed half an hour after the dance started. She waved hello to John, then started making the rounds of the floor. She approached a young man who had been standing near the speaker with a sour expression as he watched people pair off. Harry had seen him before and was not surprised he was never chosen. There was decidedly something about his demeanor that was very off-putting. He rarely smiled, and when he approached a female, it was usually brushed off. Hattie saw where Harry was looking and made a beeline for him. The look of surprise on the man's face when Hattie asked him to dance was almost comical. On the dance floor, it could hardly be said that they danced together. He jumped and spun all around, did splits and hand walks until Hattie had had enough. She thanked him for the dance and then went to the bar ordering a half pint for herself. The airman followed her to the bar and insisted on buying her another half pint. She thanked him, but declined. He became insistent in telling her he'd buy her all the drinks she wanted. She gave a firmer refusal, which he ignored. Harry felt it might be time to intervene. Approaching the bar, he tapped the insistent gentleman on the arm. He angrily spun around. Harry excused himself and eased the fellow away from the bar. He addressed himself to Hetty. "I didn't see you when you came in. Sorry I wasn't able to pick you up when my car's starter is still out." Hetty's face positively beamed on Harry. "I was looking for you out on the dance floor and passing up the time, taking a few turns. Where have you been hiding?" Harry pointed to the seat in the corner. Hattie eagerly picked up her drink and joined him in the corner. With a sour look, the airman handed her a piece of paper with his name and number on it. "Let me know when you want to trade up," he snorted, glaring at Harry, and went back to his place. Leaning against the wall, he pounded softly on it with clenched fists. Harry got himself another pint and bought one for John, inviting him to join them. Seated, John asked Hattie if she wanted him to toss out the airman who annoyed her. "No, at least in here you can keep an eye on him." She looked towards the door as another group came in. Amongst them was Oliver. He didn't acknowledge them, but went to a group of girls and picked a partner for the next dance. Harry stole a look at the paper before Hattie placed it into a pocket. The airman's name was Steve. No last name given, but Harry was pretty sure he'd seen him a time or two working at lodging. It wouldn't be much trouble to lay hands on him if need be. Harry whiled away a short time talking with Hattie and John, and when John wasn't busy with serving. John seemed a little tense that Hattie was becoming friendly with Harry. Hattie invited Harry out on the floor, and Harry reluctantly agreed. The song was a slow one, and Harry and Hattie danced close together. Her close warmth and the soft fragrance she wore raised feelings in Harry that he hadn't had in a while. She looked up into his eyes as they danced, and a warm smile crossed her lips. By the wall, Steve inwardly seethed as he watched them dance closely. Hattie murmured to Harry to kiss her, as it might make someone jealous. Harry cupped her chin in his and kissed her. When they broke, she sighed and placed her head on his chest as they continued to dance. Harry wasn't sure if Hattie was seriously or simply a very accomplished actress, but either way, he was enjoying her company. On the wall, Steve was thumping harder on it with his fists and glaring at Harry and Hattie. Behind the bar, John was disappointed in Harry and concerned for Hattie. Oliver moved to a space where he could overlook the floor and see if anyone was concentrating on anyone in particular. He noticed that the only focus was on Harry and Hattie. Steve and John were unwavering in their attention. Harry led Hattie back to the table. She declined his offer of another drink, and John was grateful that he didn't hear Harry press her. Harry spun out his beer for another half hour. "You want to walk out for a bit and get some air?" Harry said it loud enough to be heard, but not so loud as to be unnatural. Hattie rose and put her arm through his, and they walked outside. Several people followed as well, and there was a scrum at the door as people filed out into the moonlight. Among the leaving throng was Steve. Oliver followed soon after. He knew the route Harry was taking, and it would take 10 minutes for them to be in position. As Oliver left, he heard John yell out "last call" and hurrying to close the place down and leave himself. Harry and Hattie were headed past the bowling alley to the large field beyond. This area was dimly lit, and the moonlight filtered through the trees, making dappled patterns on the ground. Harry lay his jacket down next to a tree for Hattie to sit on. He sat on the grass and leaned back. Hattie leaned on Harry's arm and waited. If anything was going to happen, now would be the time. 5 minutes passed with no interruption. Hattie was getting a feeling nothing would happen that night. "Want to call it a night and try again next dance?" "Let's wait a bit longer," he whispered. From the right came a low growl, and their view of the moon was blocked by a figure covered in black and the face hidden by a ski mask. The only visible object was the silver of a blade. "You make a cute couple. I hope you had a good evening, because it's going to be your last," growled the individual with the knife. Harry started to rise and received a kick in the stomach. Hattie screamed in spite of herself. Harry recovered his breath and made a lunge for the black, shrouded body. As they toppled, Harry felt the knife penetrate his shoulder. Hattie leapt up and had the attacker in a chokehold. With her other hand, she ripped off the mask. Harry expected to see Steve's glaring countenance. What was revealed was certainly glaring, but it wasn't Steve. Oliver ran up and assisted to subdue the writhing, flailing attacker. Once standing and still, the attacker was revealed to be a female, and a very angry one at that. Hattie wrapped her scarf around the knife in Harry's shoulder and kept it in place until they could get Harry to the hospital. Oliver led his captive away, her bitter cursing fading in the distance. Harry's car was nearby, and Hattie drove him to Lakenheath to be seen to. She quailed a bit when she realized she had to pop the clutch, but needs must when the devil drives. Harry was repaired quickly, but required to remain for a couple of days. Oliver and Hattie arrived soon after breakfast for an update. Oliver flipped out his notebook. "You know, I really thought it was going to be Steve, or just possibly John." Hattie and Harry agreed. "Her name's A1C Francie Jessup, and she's originally from Cleveland, Ohio. Been here for about 7 months. Apparently she was pissed off because with all these British local ladies coming on base at the dances, she wasn't getting in on the action. She finally went off the rails and started following couples and slashing them. I was following Steve out since he was in the group that left when you did. He got as far as the playground by the youth center, and when he started swinging on the swings, I realized I was on the wrong tack. Seems like you two had things well in hand by the time I arrived." He rubbed his shins. "Damn, what a wildcat." Hattie kissed Harry on the forehead. "See you later, hero. Rest up. I'll maybe see you later." She headed out. Oliver rose and stretched. "Guess I'll be heading back too. Take care of yourself. Oh, you are going to be okay to push start your Mini tomorrow, or should I swing by and give you a bump start?" Harry laughed and promised to get the starter fixed when he got out. Rubbing his shoulder, he asked Oliver to swing by for that bump. So that's Jack and Jill. I hope you liked it. It's one of my longer shorts. So if you did like it, I'd appreciate some comments. If you didn't like it, let me know what you didn't like about it. And I think the next one, I'm probably going to read something from one of my Time Is books, or else I'll do a comedy from one of my shorts. I've got a couple of goods in there still. So I hope you're going to join me next time. either be doing one of my books or one more of my friends. I'm really thinking about doing the Ledger Creation next. There's a scene in there that, having been a cook myself for many years, deals with a magic chef hat that I find very amusing, and I think maybe that one is the one I'm going to do. But we'll see next time I do a reading. So I appreciate you coming by, and I appreciate you listening in. Hopefully I'll see you again next time we do one of these. So thank you again.